If you're having trouble getting a good night's sleep, then you are going to love today's episode. We're talking about tips and tricks to get a better night's sleep and things we should avoid in the bedroom. All of that coming up now on Morphus. Welcome back to the show, Dr. Masley. I'm so happy to have you back on.
Really great to be with you again.
So for those of you who haven't seen the interview I did with Dr. Masley about blood sugar, we're going to put a link on the card above, and then we're also going to put a link below. Fascinating information. And my team loved your interview so much that we wanted you back on again pretty quickly. So today we're going to talk about sleep. So we're going to talk about sleep hygiene, tips to help us fall asleep, but also things that we should avoid when it comes to sleep so that we actually do get a better night's sleep. So I'm just going to hand it over to you, and let's talk about first, why is it so important that we get a good night's sleep?
Well, sleep is essential for us to function. I mean, for 100,000 years, humans have had this, dark night sleep, undisturbed. We didn't have phones waking us up, maybe children, little ones in the night. But I mean, generally speaking, darkness and sleep have gone hand in hand for, as I said, thousands and thousands of years. And if we don't get enough sleep, we end up gaining weight. It's one of the common causes for weight gain because it slows our metabolism. We don't burn as many calories during the day. And plus, we might eat worse when we don't sleep. But even more importantly is that, sleep deprivation and poor quality sleep is associated with memory loss and heart disease. I mean, it's like the two biggest, threats to our health today.
I mean, you're talking also when it comes to memory loss and brain health, there's something called glymphatics. And I thought maybe you can do a little bit of an explanation of what glymphatics mean, because that's a little bit of newer research about the importance when we're sleeping about detoxing our brain.
Well, it's a good point, because when we're asleep is the time of day that we actually detox and do cell repair. I mean, as an example, cells that are on the brink of not functioning well and they're, in poor health, we actually want to kill those cells and replace them. It's called cell death. And so at night is when we clean house. We get rid of all the bad cells. We take the bad guys out. We clean, we bring in things that are new. It's like spring cleaning every night when we go to sleep. So I appreciate your point that, sleep it's how we need it to detox, clean our system out, get rid of old bad cells and bring in the new. And it's so essential to all aspects of our health.
I like to think about when we're doing that process, so it's called glymphatics. So the part of our brain that's detoxing, I guess, or the part that when we're detoxing overnight as equivalent. So sleep is equivalent to exercise because our exercise moves our lymphatic system. And when we're sleeping, it actually helps with our glymphatic system. So I love that we're mentioning, and it's such an important piece of information, which is why it's crucial that we get that good night's sleep. So Morphus talks to women in perimenopause and menopause. And unfortunately, I just did a little bit of a survey in a private Facebook group that we have. So for those of you who are not in our private Facebook group, please, we are Morphus on Facebook. We'd love you to join us. And I asked our group, do you have trouble sleeping? Do you wake up or do you sleep through the night? And I'd say the majority of women said that they wake up during the night. And it's a big issue for us as we're getting older, but also for women in perimenopause and menopause. What can you help us with? How can you help us get that better night's sleep?
Well, there's things we can do, little nuggets that we can take action on. But I think first we should talk about the things that prevent us from sleeping. Yeah. I mean, simple things like one would be too much caffeine. I mean, it takes 7 hours to remove 1 serving of caffeine a day. That's like a soda, 2 cups of tea, 1 cup of coffee, a half a cup of the Starbucks coffee. It doesn't, so 7 hours, so 3 servings a day for 21 hours, you're still caffeinated. So anything more than 2 servings a day means at night you're going to have caffeine in your system and you might fall asleep because you're tired, but then you wake up easily and it's harder to go back to sleep. So caffeine to me is like one of the most common things I've seen with my patients over time. The second one is probably alcohol, that we think, I'll have a nightcap to help me sleep. It might help you fall asleep, maybe. But what happened is when your body gets done metabolizing and taking the alcohol out, you get a startle response, which wakes you up. And the more you drink if you drink heavily, you get a bigger startle response. And usually the key is when people say, I wake up at about 2 a.m. and then or 3 and I have trouble going back to sleep, I immediately want to think, how do I ask them about their alcohol intake? Because it's so common. There's nothing wrong with having a glass or two of wine with dinner, but preferably don't drink within a couple hours of going to bed. I mean, that's really the key. A third thing that really interferes with sleep that's common is white light. Those bedroom lights, those kitchen lights, screens on the TV, on my cell phone, on my computer. Yeah. That's a very bright blue light that tells your brain to wake up. So when we get, for 100,000 years, we wake up in the morning and the white light stimulates us to get up and get going. And the red light tells us to shut down. Ideally, we'd like red light for the hour or two before we go to sleep, at least an hour, minimum a half hour, just to kind of give your brain the message it's time to wind down, calm down, and go to sleep.
Yeah.
So yes, you could put red lights on, or you can read in your bedroom with red light, but the easiest is probably to get these amber sunglasses.
The blue blockers, you mean? Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah. Those are great. And put them
wear
on
those the hour before bedtime to start telling, it blocks the white, blue light. The blue light is really the spectrum that's the most problematic.
Yeah, those are great tips.
So I think if we just did those 3 things well, we don't overdo the caffeine, we don't overdo the alcohol, especially before we go to bed, and we get rid of the white light, that by itself would actually help a lot of people from my experience.
And I like what you're saying about the alcohol, because I do a show with, his name is Bryce Wild, and it's called Brain Spanners. And he talked about how when quarantine hit and, everything, 2020, 2021, it's been a little bit of a whirlwind for all of us. Obviously, it's been a lot of a whirlwind for all of us. A lot of us resorted to drinking more alcohol, and a little bit more than we should have. And it does disrupt our sleep. And although we think it might be helping, it's actually disrupting REM sleep, like you said. And also, like you said, we're waking up later once we've processed it or metabolized it. So it really is not an answer, especially if you're having trouble sleeping. One of the questions, or one of the things I remember a long time ago, is making sure, if I can just add to some of the things you're saying, is making sure that our rooms are in total darkness. So if you have blinds that are allowing light in, or you have the TV that has like the red light on the control, or anything like that, is making sure that we have total darkness. And the reason why I bring that up is I'd love you to talk about melatonin, because melatonin is a hormone in our body that's released in total darkness. So what happens when our room isn't pitch black? How does that affect melatonin, and why is that important for sleep?
Well, you can, your point is really good, because you can inhibit melatonin production by sleeping in a room with light. And it's really that blue spectrum light again. So if I'm traveling, I'm in a hotel room, I don't mind so much when I see a red dot here or there, or something red light that's subtle. What I'll go and get towels for and cover things up is blue and white light.
Yeah.
So that is what I really want to get rid of. One, because it keeps me awake. Yeah. Clearly for me. And 2, it's the melatonin production, I think, is really, melatonin is important for not just sleep, but many aspects of our health and repair and detoxification. So it has multiple benefits, and it's essential hormone that happens during that detox period at night. So I'll literally go around the hotel room with towels blocking under the door. If the alarm has a red light on it, I'm not so concerned, but otherwise I'll turn it upside down, or put a pillow over it or something. Yeah, I'm always asking housekeeping for extra towels. I think they're like, you're one person in the room, but these are the days when I was actually traveling, but it's like, wait, one person, you have like 12 towels, but I do the same, like under the door. Exactly. I actually do cover like the clock and, whatever else is kind of affecting the light, but I love that you say that. And then little tricks about like closing the blinds, you can use like a hanger to actually keep it closed, or like the pants, the pants hanger that kind of opens like that. You can clamp it, like some tricks I've seen, but sure, that's a good idea. I've never tried that.
Yeah. So like interesting. Okay. So thank you for those tips. I think that they are very important, and making sure also not that we don't eat too much before bed. So giving ourselves 3 to 4 hours. Why is that important, that we don't eat too close to when we go to sleep?
Well, There's several reasons for that. One is it changes our metabolism from an energy burning, processing to resting stage. Two, people tend to get heartburn at night, and that can keep them awake. So,
good point.
So I really like the idea of not eating a minimum of 2 hours before you go to bed. And I think 3 is more ideal to stop 3. That comes down to what time do you get off work and what time do you have to get up in the morning. I mean, there's, very many factors, but
of course,
clearly we don't want to eat within 2 hours of going to bed. We will sleep better. That energy metabolism from digesting food will rev us up a little bit. So we want to be mostly done with our digestion in a fasting state. And I mentioned that detox before, but even think of like beta amyloid production. Beta amyloid production happens during the day when we're eating food and digesting. And when we're totally done in that fasting state, that's when we start removing beta amyloid. So kind of the worst thing you can do is have a bedtime snack and then get up at 2 or 3 and take another snack, because then you're just growing beta amyloid in your brain all night long. And it's not that beta amyloid is the cause of Alzheimer's and memory loss, but it's certainly a sign of it. And so I think we really want to have that rest period at night, a fasting period, a minimum of, like 10, 12 hours and up to 15 hours for some people each night.
One thing that really resonated with me from our last interview, again, we link to it below and we're going to put a card up, is you said we're either creating it, beta amyloid, or we're breaking it down. And, I was like, okay, that makes a lot of sense. So being in that fasting state helps to break it down. So of course, making sure that we're setting ourselves up for success and not eating too close to bed and not waking up and having a midnight snack will all help to break it down. And all is important for brain health, which is super important. And
if you have to have something, it's better to have nothing. But if you have to have something, then have an herbal tea. Something warm that, like valerian tea, for example. Valerian is, if we were to talk about some of the supplements and herbal agents that we can use for sleep, it increases GABA relaxation activity in the brain. And valerian, it comes in capsules and tablets. And we know from randomized clinical trials that 400, 500 milligrams at bedtime improves quality of sleep and duration of sleep. So I'll have, I have valerian tea in my kitchen. And if I want to have something before I go to bed, or if I wake up at night once in a while and having trouble sleeping, I might get up and just have unsweetened, no sugar, no, I don't put anything in it. Just, it's soothing. It's something warm. You can sip on it. I think that's a really nice tip that people can use if they are best is nothing. But if you are going to have something, then look for some herbal tea. If you like chamomile or something else, that'd be fine. Yeah, ashwagandha is another one.
Ashwagandha is great, the adaptogenic herbs. I actually really like chamomile because it has glycine, and glycine is a natural relaxer. So that's really a great tip. You mentioned the word GABA. Can you explain what that is and why it's important?
So the GABA receptors in your brain help induce relaxation and put us into a deeper stage of sleep instead of light sleep. So GABA, you'll actually see it in some supplements as well. But that is what valerian is stimulating, is the GABA activity in our brain, which is that calming, soothing, relaxation wave, opposite of like what cortisol or other things, the other aspects of our brain do that are more excitatory.
Okay, understood. So what are some other ingredients? So you mentioned valerian, we mentioned chamomile because of the glycine. What are some other ingredients that we can take before bed to help us relax and help us keep us asleep?
Well, you mentioned melatonin before, and certainly, especially, the most efficacious use for it is with jet lag. Anytime we're jet lagged, we're throwing our melatonin production off. Usually you're looking about an hour. Time zone is 1 milligram of melatonin. So if you're going East Coast, West Coast, East Coast, for a few nights, you can take 3 milligrams. Going to Europe, you can take 5. Something like that. That's usually my upper limit that I would recommend, unless, your doctor has some specific reason for it, is anywhere from a milligram up to 5 milligrams at night for a week at a time for sleep. Some people report benefit with it on a regular basis, but that's never really been shown clearly in clinical studies.
So that was going to be actually my question. Is it safe to take on a regular basis? I know melatonin as a hormone is safe, but is it something we should be taking on a regular basis? Because I know some people find it makes them even a little bit anxious, or some people say they wake up groggy. So I like that we're actually having this conversation around melatonin.
I think melatonin is very safe if you even use it regularly. There's, some health experts that recommend larger doses, 5, 10, 15 milligrams every night, not for sleep, but for other health benefits. I think, to me, it's just the evidence is lacking, and I'm not going to go there, but
good. Yeah. Okay.
So I don't have any concerns with someone using melatonin. One of the concerns is you don't want synthetic melatonin. You want something that's been processed. So, and you don't want it to be from cow brain.
Okay. So how would somebody know?
Think about it. For a long time, the most common source of melatonin came from the pituitary glands of cows, which were basically cow brain.
Okay.
And, this scare over mad cow disease,
right,
has kind of gotten rid of most of it. But I usually look for a synthetic form of melatonin when I'm looking for it on the label.
How would a consumer or viewers know when they go to the store that they're getting?
It'll say vegetarian or non-bovine, something like that would be the hint that you're not getting cow brain, a pituitary gland from a cow to collect the melatonin in your supplement. That used to be the most common source, but now I think hopefully it's really diminishing over time.
Okay, well, that's great information. And what are your thoughts on taking magnesium before bed?
So magnesium is something I highly recommend. 70% of Americans, Canadians, or Western Europeans are magnesium deficient.
Yeah.
It's super common. And the symptoms of magnesium deficiency are, migraines, muscle cramps. Cramps can keep you up at night. Insomnia. Your blood sugar goes up. Your blood pressure goes up. I would put, magnesium is probably my number 3 agent. The first one would be valerian. I probably think of melatonin second, and I think of magnesium third for, aids that I would have someone take for sleep, for occasional sleep disturbance, and they want something that's not habit forming. And as I said, most people are deficient and they need more. So the side effect from too much magnesium is loose stools.
So you'll know if you're taking too much. How much magnesium before bed?
It's not like it's going to surprise you and sneak up on you.
How much magnesium before bed? Like 300 milligrams for a woman?
200 to 400 milligrams at a time. Now, sometimes the magnesium can bother your stomach. So I always prefer protein-bound magnesium, magnesium glycate, magnesium malate, magnesium chelate. One of those I tend to avoid. Magnesium oxide, it's more of a GI irritant, much more likely to upset your stomach. So some protein-bound source has better absorption, and it's much more gentle on your stomach.
Yeah, I'm not a big fan of any of the oxides, iron oxide or any of them, actually. So I like
iron oxide is almost mean to give someone.
That's a whole other conversation. And I am not a fan of iron oxide at all for several reasons. But okay, I love that you say that's almost mean. That's hilarious, actually. Okay, so in other ingredients, so now we've talked about, all of those. What are some other natural supplements? Like, what are your thoughts on CBD before bed, or even some women?
I'd say it's variable. So some people it's going to help, and some people feel anxious, some feel relaxed. So it all depends on your CBD receptors in your brain. So I think that's really a good thing that now we're into someone who's got long-term sleeping issues and they're looking for solutions. And certainly that would be, to me, a safe, efficacious thing they could try. Just be aware that you may not tolerate it. You actually may not like it. So that's a question of trial and error. One of the things that I think is essential during the day to sleep successfully at night, we said the 3 things to avoid were caffeine, too much alcohol, and too much white light late at night. But one of the things, and then, a nutrient like magnesium, but one of the things we really need to sleep well at night is activity during the day, workout, exercise, a good walk, something like that. One of the more common causes of insomnia is people don't get enough activity. They're not physically tired and they don't feel mentally tired.
That's a really good point, actually. To make sure that you're getting that exercise. If we're going to go back to I just want to go back to supplements for a second. And I do love the lifestyle tips, and we can get there. theanine, that's another one, another ingredient that I absolutely love, L-theanine, because that, ignites the alpha waves in our brain and helps to calm and relax us, but without making us jittery or anything.
Well, and helps produce, converted to serotonin, is I think the really theme for that. So many of the sleeping agents will contain GABA, valerian, and L-theanine. Those are probably, and maybe melatonin. Those are probably the top 4 things I don't know why, but they oftentimes don't contain magnesium, which
secret ingredient
is more important. But L-theanine is a really helpful, useful agent for people to try. Now, if your serotonin levels are good, it's not going to help. But I think for many people, that makes a big difference for sleep.
And I think serotonin is made in our gut, most of it. And I think for so many of us, especially in menopause and perimenopause, our digestion is a little off. So we may not be making as much serotonin as we need. And it's that feel-good neurotransmitter. For those of you who don't know what serotonin is, it helps us to makes us feel good. We're talking about serotonin, and I think we'd be remiss not to mention tryptophan, because tryptophan converts to serotonin in the body. So explain a little bit about tryptophan. So, should we be taking it as a supplement, or should we be eating tryptophan containing foods about a couple of hours, maybe at dinner time?
Well, at dinner time, again, so tryptophan would be like turkey, milk, bananas, like that idea of have a warm glass of milk before dinner is giving you some tryptophan. But so if you're dairy intolerant, you're not, but turkey's certainly an option. Milk is another, but those are my top 3 sources for tryptophan, but it's also really common to find it in a supplement.
I think isn't it cashews? I think cashews also have some tryptophan. I think it's anyways, but I think so. But we can even put sources below. Okay, so now we've covered supplements, and I do want to, before we move on, you talked about you mentioned people who have long-term sleep issues, and this week I was talking to a girlfriend of mine who has literally been she's had trouble sleeping for a really long time. She's now in menopause, and she is resorting to sleeping pills, and she is to the point where she's taking them on a regular basis. I want to help her. And I was excited that we were having this conversation, because I wanted to hear it from someone like yourself, who's an expert when it comes to this, who's a doctor, who can explain why we shouldn't be relying on sleeping pills every single night. If you need it for a short-term solution, that's one thing, but as a standard sleep aid, why it's not good for us. And then what can she do? We talked about all these things.
Here's the challenge, is you're probably aware of. The more you use them, the harder it is to sleep without them. And they're clearly causing some dependency. Some of them will actually cause significant side effects when you try to stop them. You'll have withdrawal symptoms like benzodiazepines, like the old Valium, but now, there's all these newer temazepam and all these newer agents that are out there that are more short-acting, Xanax, all of those. Yes, they will help you relax, so there are times in life when, some crisis happens and you might consider a pharmaceutical way of helping to deal with anxiety short term, but they're really not intended for long-term use. They're like for a week or two, a disruption in your life. There are people who have chronic anxiety. They've had it their entire lives, and these can be very useful medications for someone if properly prescribed and managed. But for an average person, these are not meant for daily sleep. Ambien, which is probably less habit forming, but not habit forming, is another really common one. Sonata, Ambien, these are agents that aren't in that benzodiazepam family, but still, the more you use them, the harder it is to sleep without them. So to me, the keys are, that you're getting those nutrients we talked about for sleep, like magnesium, and you're using some of those supplements, which are all pretty benign. They're not associated that I've ever seen in the literature with you can't get by without them, and they don't make your sleep cycles worse when you don't have them. Most of the medications for sleep do that. So it's exercise, it's meeting those nutrient needs, and there's stress management. That's the other thing. That's the big elephant in the room we haven't talked about yet that I wanted to at least bring up, is that a lot of, insomnia is related to not being able to self-calm and get really calm easily. So I think meditation or using an app called HeartMath can be super useful. I use HeartMath, haven't used it for years in my clinic as a way of assessing, do people know how to get calm and stay calm? So can I say, okay, I'd like to, in a couple minutes, we're going to test your ability to get calm. I want you to try to relax and see if you can do that. And so I've been pretty amazed that some people have no clue how to get calm. They're just underneath. They don't show it, but they're just agitated all the time. And you can see that when you actually look at their breathing patterns using an app like HeartMath. So HeartMath is a biofeedback tool you can use to learn to get calm and relax. And so exercise, the nutrients and that, for someone who's hooked on sleeping agents, they have to wean off. So you gradually talk to you might want to talk to your doctor about how to wean off them. But my general approach is, cut the dose in half each week and gradually drop off. So by a month from now, you're not using them. And then you try so for people who have long-term chronic insomnia, I usually say try not to use them not more than once a week, maximum not more than twice a week. That's the kind of general rule I use for helping people avoid addiction to sleeping meds.
Thank you for that information. Just before we move on, actually, we were talking about tryptophan before, and a lot of people are asking me about 5-HTP. Can you explain what 5-HTP is? It the same thing as tryptophan, and can that help people sleep?
I think of it in the same category as tryptophan. I think of it as similar to using tryptophan.
We talked about lifestyle. We talked about supplements. We talked about things to avoid. Is there anything else that we didn't talk about that can help women in perimenopause and menopause sleep better?
Well, the room environment really does make a difference. Mm-hmm. So I think exercise, right, nutrients, natural agents, relaxation and knowing how to get calm, meditate, prayer, whatever works for you. But you also want a room that's conducive to sleep. A good quality bed that's comfortable. It seems like a no-brainer, but you'd be surprised how many people sleep on poor quality beds. Yeah. The temperature makes a difference. We know that people sleep best somewhere between 64, 68, up to 72 degrees. And a lot of people are trying to sleep in rooms that are warmer than that. And for some people, it's just counterproductive. So, we mentioned a dark room. Well, yes, you want it very dark. Almost no light is ideal. And if there is any light at all, it'd be just a little red light here or there. But cool is also a factor for that. So, and for some people, it's going to be cold enough that you can actually, your feet feel a little cold, so you put socks on. That's going to be an individual choice, but how cool do you want it? But ideally, it's cool enough to your feet notice it. And, so dark and quiet. Yeah. Noise is a big factor for sleep, and cold. So I think the environment is really important. Some of the things we shouldn't be doing in bed, in our bedroom at all, are like watching television or screen time, or working, because then you're training yourself to actively be thinking and be alert in the bedroom. I'd like to tell my patients to limit, sleep and romance are the two activities, or maybe some reading before, calm reading before you go to bed, but that's about it. Yeah. I don't want people using their bedroom as a working environment, because that's conducive to think of work.
It's true.
And television, again, not only is it a screen that's going to keep you awake, but it's very stimulating. It's the last thing you need when you're trying to go to sleep.
And even taking a warm bath before bed can help, putting in some magnesium salts into the bath or some lavender oil just to kind of like bring it down, or throw one drop of lavender oil on your pillow.
Well, I like the lavender, that's really a nice touch, because we talked about darkness, sight, and, temperature, which is kind of on your skin, tactile, and, that is going to be cold and quiet. So all of those, but the one we didn't mention was our nose. And when I thought of that, I thought immediately of, lavender as a relaxing. So you can use, oils, essential oils, and put it on something that'll warm it up. You can put a couple drops in a hot bath. I like that as a calming way to, relax. And some relaxation routine at night, so when you say a hot bath, what you're basically saying is before you go to bed, you want to kind of wind down and relax. And so cuddling, romance, a hot bath, those are all great ways to relax before we go to bed.
Yeah. And I just want to say one thing about lavender. I was doing some research and I was reading that lavender actually can be an endocrine disruptor. So I wouldn't, I'm not a big fan of taking it internally, but, putting it on your pillow or, just smelling it in the bottle or something. So just kind of like a little side note, especially for women in perimenopause and menopause. I have a question about the darkness for you. So you're talking about making sure that our room is really dark. What about using a sleep mask? Does that help? Does that count as, so let's say you can't make your room dark. Well,
they've done studies on that for people flying on planes, and looked at, can they fall asleep and with hotel travel? And yes, a dark mask really, yes. If you, ideally in your own room, you would create a room that's dark because masks are somewhat constrained. But when you're traveling or in a hotel room, honestly, I carry one of those in my bedtime
travel bag.
Yeah, in my travel bag. I've always got one in case I'm staying in a place where you can't get the blinds closed. I mean,
yeah.
I love your idea about, using the hangers to try to pull them together, but sometimes it's hopeless. So yes, I have always got that as a backup. If nothing else, yes, long term, you want to be able to create a dark bedroom and get night blind, knock out dark shades. But that's for a temporary solution. That can be a really good one.
Yeah, because even in our bedroom, I know sometimes in our backyard, we have one of those automatic lights that go on and then the light, and I have blackout shades or blackout blinds, but it still gets through. So I'll put on my sleep mask, but I was always wondering if I'm cheating it a little bit, but does that cheating actually help to make that room dark? Because some of us, many of us may not be able to control that environment exactly the way we want it. And so is it a great secondary option, which is what you're saying?
Well, like taking a nap during the day, it's very hard to get something dark during the day for a short power nap if you need one. So that's another way of getting darkness during the daytime for a short nap. And speaking of naps, I think naps can be fine for people 30 to 20 minutes. But certainly if you're having trouble sleeping at night, you don't want to be sleeping more than a half hour during the day. So I'd really limit the duration of any daytime naps. I wouldn't let someone try to fall asleep a couple times during the day if they're having insomnia at night, because it just makes it worse.
Yeah. And you don't want to go past stage 1 or 2 when you're sleeping during the day, you're taking a nap, because that's when you wake up really groggy and tired, and it may actually even interrupt your sleep at night. Before we end the interview, I think it's important that we talk about shift workers and people who have, they don't, go to bed at 10 o'clock at night and wake up at 6 or 7 a.m. or 8 a.m. What advice do you have for people who are working overnight and need to sleep during the day? So we have the eye mask, which I think is a great thing, but what are some other tips we can give them?
Stick to a cycle. Shifting back and forth to try to live in both worlds, it's really hard on your system. They really show signs of adrenal burnout, fatigue, higher rates of depression, and there's many, heart disease is more common in shift workers. Mm-hmm. So that's yes, we do need people to work, and certainly, medical emergencies and power needs certain things at night that someone's got to do, and I'm glad they're there doing them. Yeah. But if you choose to work at night, then make sure you're not changing your, one of the worst things we see is like international pilots, who are going back and forth across oceans on these long flights regularly, and it's really exhausting. So a shift worker at least has the choice of staying in that zone. So I usually try to get someone to stay in a zone for at least a month or more at a time. The idea of working 3 12s and then in trying to shift the other 4 days during the same week, 3 12-hour night shifts, and then 4 daytime live it up activities. Really hard to go back and forth physiologically. So I discourage that. Live in your time. And if you don't handle that, then probably you don't want to be a shift worker.
Well,
that's a challenging one. That's a tough one. But it's hard on people's health. They pay them extra for a good reason.
I mean, especially for the medical community, right? You nurses and doctors who are working.
Nurses and doctors who've been doing this for decades.
And so many other people who work overnight, like you were saying. So if we were to give them a tip, and let's say they don't have a choice and they have to do it, because, the sleep mask, is that one good way that can help them?
All that's going to do is help them with the darkness. It doesn't help them shift back and forth.
Okay.
And the lack of sleep and the impact on their adrenal system. And so clearly some people are better than others. There are pilots, for example. Some will only go north-south. They will not, they can't handle the jet lag. So I think the people who can handle it, though, they've tested it and they got away with it. And some people absolutely can't. So there's some biological individuality here in terms of what we can handle, and it's different for each person.
Yeah.
But as a general rule, I would encourage someone who's a shift worker to stay in that sleep pattern as much as possible.
As much as possible. So avoid the back and forth, and maybe supporting their adrenals or giving them a little bit of extra support with some nutrition or supplements, perhaps, but
meditation, more important that they're using apps like HeartMath and doing regular meditation to learn how to relax and calm, because their cortisol, melatonin systems are all mixed up. And it's when do you want to relax and when do you want to be waking up? Those are important physiologic parts of life, and they're really important to our health. And they're not something we want to mess with in an extreme way.
We're going to talk before we go about cortisol, because I cannot let you go, but not, our whole other interview was about blood sugar, and one of my favorite interviews really of all time. We learned so much. Let's talk about the role that blood sugar plays overnight when we're sleeping and why it's important that we keep it balanced.
Well, we have, our sugar's up during the day to nourish us, and we're still using it at night. Our brain is still using glucose even when we're sleeping, and so does our heart to pump all night long, 24/7. So we always want a steady supply of energy to our body. But cortisol is the hormone we think of it as the stress, the emergency hormone. It's what shoots up when we're under high levels of stress, like someone's chasing us, or we feel some amazing deadline that we've got to beat. And so naturally, it's great to have challenges that we deal with and feeling accomplishment. But if you're feeling stressed all the time and you're feeling overwhelmed by stress, when your cortisol goes up and stays up, that's the big difference. We always get a spike in the morning, and we get somewhat of a spike when we have normal challenges in our life, which are great. But if your cortisol goes up and stays up, that's physiologic burnout. Your blood sugar levels go up and they stay high. You lose muscle mass, you lose bone mass, you're shrinking your brain, and you're accelerating, so you're burning up your body's tissues to deal with that emergency situation. It does help you get going in the morning, but 24/7 high cortisol is deadly. And the best way to keep our cortisol levels calm is to get a good night's sleep, to get a workout, to do some meditation, to have some relaxation and calm every day.
Yeah.
Perhaps the last thing I'd like to mention related to sleep before we finish has to do with sleep apnea.
Yes, please.
Many people are exhausted because they don't sleep well. And it has nothing to do with these choices. Their airways obstructed. There's central reasons in the brain, but more common are obstructive reasons, like they might have signs of snoring, or their spouse partner may say, "Hey, I noticed that you stopped breathing at night." So the signs for sleep apnea are like waking up in the morning with a headache, waking up multiple times at night, loud snoring, your partner says that you stopped breathing, you fall asleep during the day. Any or all of those can be a sign that your breathing is obstructed at night. You're not oxygenating. Literally, your oxygen levels drop when that happens, and you're not oxygenating your heart and your brain, and they increase your risk for memory loss and severe heart disease. And it increases the risk of death significantly. So anybody who's got sleep problems, one of the things I always want to rule out is that they don't have sleep apnea. And there's easy testing you can even do at home. A little device you can wear on your forehead now, and monitors that you can do, or even oxygen monitoring on a finger that you can wear to test, do you have sleep apnea? So I think that's one of the things we would never want to miss, was someone with a chronic sleep disorder or sleep apnea, because it's so serious and it's pretty easy to treat.
What are your thoughts on the rings that you can use overnight for monitoring your sleep? I guess it looks at oxygen levels, or it looks at how you're sleeping. Do you think those are something that would be a good thing for people to be able to tell? And what is that device that you're talking about? Sorry, two questions.
Well, a device is like something we had in our office that we would have someone wear overnight. It could measure their oxygenation. It looked at brainwaves, so I could see if they were in deep sleep, REM sleep, shallow sleep. I could see if they were awake or not. It tells me if it happens when they're on their back, or if it also happens when they're on their side. So a ton of information from this little headband you wear.
So you speak to your doctor if you want to do.
Yeah, but usually a doctor's going to have to order that as like a sleep study.
Okay.
That's a mini version of having to go to a hospital, which is pretty invasive, where you sleep overnight in a sleep lab. And
yeah,
it's a much bigger deal. This is something you can do in your own bed, and like the study costs $100 or something like that. So dramatically less expensive, and still gives you a ton of really cool information. The rings you're talking about, whether they're on the wrist or a watch, some of those can measure oxygenation, which is nice. They can measure your heart rate to see if you get startled. But I've not seen any that really can tell you, is your position related to it? And also, what kind of sleep do you get tonight? Do you get much deep sleep and restorative sleep, or is it all just shallow, poor quality sleep? So I think something that can distinguish between that's really important for someone who has chronic sleep issues. And one of the tests I think is like essential to ask a doctor to order.
Okay. And so that test that you're saying would be the one that you wear on your head, and that will give you all that information.
It'll give you a great deal of information to go from, and at least it would help exclude the worrisome things that I would be concerned about for someone who had chronic sleeping problems.
Okay. Great information. Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Masley. Always so informative and great tips. And I appreciate you. I appreciate you helping us and helping our community, because the nice thing is that we can help ourselves, right? And I know it's a lot of information to process, but even if we do a few things to start, baby steps, it'll make a big difference when it comes to our sleep. So thank you so much. Can you please tell everybody where they can find out more information about you?
Well, if you'd like more information, visit the website, drmasley.com, drmasley.com. I've got blogs and recipes that I put out for free. I'm on a regular basis, and lots of useful information.
And I know that you also have written several books, and I know you have a new one. Can you share that with us?
Well, my latest book is The Mediterranean Method. I love this book. It's the easiest diet on the planet to follow that's fantastic for your health. And, plus Mediterranean lifestyle has all sorts of tips that are really pretty good for your sleep as well.
And following the Mediterranean diet, it's always like one of the number one or number two diets that is recommended by all the health experts that we should follow. So maybe just give a tiny tidbit on what is the Mediterranean diet and why is it so good for us? Well,
the U.S. News and World Report has ranked it number one 3 years in a row. Wow. And then in the top 3 for the last decade, because it's like the easiest to follow, as I said. It's number 1 for preventing diabetes, for helping your brain. And it's in the last 3 to 5 years, it's been either number 1 or number 2 every year for your heart. So all these benefits, and the food's delicious, making it pretty easy to follow. I mean, the essence is that we're eating more plant foods, vegetable, fruit, beans, nuts, seafood. You get some poultry, some dairy, but the thing is, most of the dairy and poultry is organic, and the really things that they're avoiding are processed foods. That's the primary, you're making things that are local, in season, that are colorful and fragrant and beautiful, and putting them together in an easy way. So they're not complicated dishes. The meals are pretty easy to prepare. The predominant oil we cook with is olive oil, no surprise, extra virgin olive oil. Yeah. And lots of herbs and spices and, garlic, rosemary, Italian herb seasoning. And then the Eastern Mediterranean starts using some curry spices and cardamom and turmeric and, those types of anti-inflammatory spices as well. So really very varied, tremendously varied. When you think of the entire Mediterranean basin from Spain, Italy, Greece, on to Turkey and Egypt, it's just so amazing cuisine that's really good for your health and easy to follow.
And are there recipes in the book? So if we...
Yes, it's, we have 60 recipes in here.
Wow.
My favorite recipe, and I actually researched this. My wife and I spent 3 summers on a boat sailing across the whole Mediterranean basin.
Wow.
So I was out searching small town. I would consistently, you'd go up into a mom and pop restaurant and say, what's your favorite regional dish?
That's awesome. I love it.
How do you make that? Well, they wouldn't tell you, but you could go to the market and say in the market the next day, hey, I had this dish last night. And they go, I know how you make that. They tell you the ingredients.
That's awesome. They share their secrets. So do you love to cook? Do you and your wife love to cook?
I do. You may not know this, but I'm a physician, nutritionist. I did a chef internship at the Four Seasons.
Oh, wow. That's incredible.
So long ago, I realized what people need are recipes. They don't need more prescriptions from doctors for medications. They want recipes that are easy to make, delicious, and you can find the ingredients at your local grocery store. That's what's going to transform health in America today is recipes. And probably the Mediterranean diet's as good as it gets.
I love it. Well, congratulations on your book. I think that's fantastic. And thank you so much for being on our show.
Oh, always a delight to be with you.
What an incredible interview with Dr. Masley. I learned a lot, and I hope you did too. If you got value out of today's interview, please give us a big thumbs up and leave a comment below. Whether you have a question for me or Dr. Masley, we will answer it. And please share our video because the more you share shows you care. Thanks for watching, everyone. We'll see you next time.